Hey guys, we got our keys. The book of Revelation is talking about the keys, so we got our keys out today. What's going on? Behind the pulpit is in the house. Pastor Dave here, and I am here with my co-pastor, Pastor Bob, and we've been talking about some keys there, brother.
Let me ask you the question.
But your keys are bigger than my keys.
That's
Look at those things.
They're also older than your keys.
Are you going to be checking into the castle of Wittenberg there? Where are you headed?
What, Tim, when you ordered these, what did it actually say on Amazon? What was the, like...
Is it like a Halloween prop
like
or
Halloween
something?
keys? Martin Luther keys?
I can get back to you on that. It was like
See those things.
prop,
There you go. Feel
stage
that.
prop keys, wrought iron.
Iron. They do look iron.
Guys, this is what we call
those are I picture those being the keys that Jesus actually had in the vision to John. They just look exactly like that.
I don't know what door you can unlock, but it's powerful. Hey guys, good to be with you today. We're here to talk to you about all things regarding our series on the book of Revelation, what's going on in the life of our church. We got some serious sprinting to do today. We're going to talk about some details of the book of Revelation, and it's going to be a great show. So thank you guys for joining us. We are so excited about that. But before we go any further in the show, we do want to talk about some things that are happening in the news. All right, Pastor Bob, what news story should we cover this week? There's a lot to choose from, but where would you like to begin, my friend?
There is a lot to choose from. I mentioned one to you this morning that apparently there's a dock worker strike that could upend the economy and the election. The Longshoremen, International Longshoremen's Association, which represents 85,000 dock workers nationwide, is threatening to strike on October 1st if the union cannot reach an agreement with the port ownership. So apparently, I guess this happens. These guys are focused on the East and Gulf coasts, and there could be some issues in the supply chain. So I heard about that this morning, and that was a little disconcerting. I was wondering if my Amazon packages will be coming on time, but apparently that's a brewing, Pastor Dave. What do you think about that?
You know, this could be a very interesting fall. We'll see how long the strike lasts. We'll see if an agreement can be in the works, and hopefully this will be resolved before it becomes too problematic for our economy.
Yeah, so that's on the docket of coming up here. It could be the October surprise, as they say.
I never go over there to the docks. Like usually when I'm driving to Newark Airport or whatever, I'll always see the exits there for Port Newark and stuff like that. Yeah. But I never go down there.
So isn't it? Didn't back in the day, who was it that had a ministry to the dock workers? Was it Moody or was it the guy who started the CM, A.B. Simpson? I thought they both sounds had really familiar on ministering to the dock workers,
right,
in Manhattan.
I don't remember. I do remember that Rocky Balboa used to collect money on the docks in Philadelphia. He used to go over there and shake people and get the money out of them. That was where he spent a lot of his time. But
all right, well,
interesting story. We'll see what happens here.
Stay tuned on that. Did you have another news story? Anything that you saw this week that piqued your eye?
Well, I think we'll just go with the one that you had lined up next.
Well, I didn't necessarily have it lined up, but it crossed my mind. So that was a union thing, and then there's also a technology thing with Elon Musk. We mentioned about the whole Mars issue our first time back, and I saw a post that he was saying that right now, if you have a Tesla, I guess there's certain Teslas you can buy that you can just summon them from your parking spot. If you're, in a restaurant, you could summon your Tesla and it will drive up to you. Apparently, he says we're getting pretty close to where you can just summon the Tesla from wherever it is. So you could be out, and you can call your Tesla from home to come pick you up. And that, to me, was a little freaky.
Back in 1983, there was an evening sitcom known as Knight Rider. And David Hasselhoff used to do something like this with Kit the car.
The Tesla.
And here we are, 41 years later, and maybe it's becoming reality. Maybe the future is here.
Yeah. Will these Teslas sound like Mr. Feeney? That's the question. You remember Mr. Feeney? What was the actor's name that played? He did the voice for
Kit,
Knight Rider.
Right. Yeah. Well, all right. Interesting
we'll
story.
We'll have to look that up. Anyways, those are stories in the news.
A lot going on. Very good. Well, we'll keep you guys posted. And we wanted to talk to you guys about our great book war. I think things have been sort of settling down here. I haven't felt the heat like we used to feel.
They have.
So I thought we should ramp it up a little bit today.
I think you should recommend one today because I did one the first time.
I'm ready. So one of the things that we've been doing at Millington is talking about Revelation, and Revelation is an apocalyptic book. And this book was paradigm shifting for me about reading the books of prophecy in the Bible. It's by Brent Sandy. It's called Plowshares and Pruning Hooks. You're probably familiar with that phraseology. It's found in the prophets. It's found in the book of Micah. It's found in the book of Isaiah, that they will beat their plowshares. They will beat their weapons into plowshares and pruning hooks.
A lot of beating.
And it will be a time of peace as opposed to a time of war, right? So that's the kind of symbols, that's the kind of language we find in the prophetic books. And Brent Sandy does a great job sort of helping us understand apocalyptic literature in the Bible. I would highly recommend this, and this was something that they did have us read at Dallas Seminary, and I found it to be rather pregnant with implications in terms of how do we interpret the book of Revelation, how do we interpret prophecy, how do we understand these books with all of these symbols and dragons and harlots and symbolic numbers and 10 horns and 7 heads and all kinds of stuff like that. Brent Sandy does a good job. So that's what I'd recommend this week. Plowshares and pruning hooks.
Is there a prime example in the book of what he's talking about?
Mm-hmm. Well, one particular example is he talks about the language of judgment and how it was typically depicted in the Bible in somewhat flamboyant ways and somewhat drastic, exaggerative ways. And when you see this language every single time in the Bible, what it's talking about is that God will bring about judgment upon that particular nation or upon that particular people. And that's really good to know. So when you see this kind of language, like the sun being darkened, the moon turning to blood, stars falling from the sky, that's called cosmic deconstruction language. And every single time that language is used in the Bible, what it's talking about is a military judgment that's coming from one nation upon another nation because God is summoning them, just like the Tesla car. God is summoning Babylon, or he's summoning Assyria, or he's summoning Rome, or he's summoning Greece as his method of judgment. And when we see that kind of language in the Bible, that's what it's talking about. And so that's good for us to know and recognize when we see that, because sometimes that language is even in the New Testament, like in the Olivet Discourse or in the book of Revelation. So Brent Sandy does a good job helping us understand those things.
I'm just picturing maybe you could pick up your keys and start shaking them, and that would just summon your car. Oh,
come on,
right outside.
Mr. Tesla.
It's time to go.
I'm ready for you.
Yeah, I'm sure the Tesla doesn't have keys like that, though.
So that's my book recommendation for this week.
Wonderful. Well, let's go pick it up.
Awesome. Very good. Now, we always like to have, once per show, this thing called There's a Chart for That. There's a chart for that.
I wanted to change
You had at least two charts.
segment to chart sightings.
I like it.
And
I like it. There was
a chart sighting yesterday.
There was 2 charts yesterday, bro. So tell us about your charts, man. How long did you work on these? What do they depict? What do they represent? What are you trying to show us here?
I'm not quite sure how long I worked on them, but I did scour the internet. I asked ChatGPT to help me find a chart for the things I was trying to communicate, and this is what I came.
Wait a minute. ChatGPT can help me find charts.
Well,
I did not even know this.
Scouring the internet so I could summon a chart from somewhere in the.
Now I got a new friend to help me find more charts.
Yeah. Well, so
which charts do you want to talk about?
I did find 2 charts, and I made a chart. So technically, I guess there's 3, but there's one that's kind of showing a compare and contrast. So,
Tim,
why don't you pull up? There we go.
What are we looking at here, bro?
So we were talking. In Revelation 1, and in particular, there appears to be an outline that's at the end of Revelation 1, verse 19. Very, very famously, John says, write down the things that are, the things that are about to be, the things that are going to take place after this, or something to that extent. And a lot of people interpret that as being an outline of the entire book. Now, I sort of compared and contrast
linear.
Now, there's... Yeah. Is it linear or is it a repeat? So that's sort of the thing that people have been wrestling with in terms of the outline of Revelation. Do you think things will chronologically unfold in the future, or is basically Revelation 6 to 19 three major repetitions of the same event, looking at it from different angles. So if you put up the chart there, I asked the question, how do we interpret Revelation, and I just kind of tried to simplify it. I had other charts that I used in my run through, and Pastor Dave said they're too complicated, so this was what I came up with. So let me explain this. So on the left, if you're somebody who's a futurist, like you see basically everything from Revelation 4, 5, 6 onward as being future from our perspective. Usually you will think that these three cycles that happen within the book are building upon one another in terms of intensity, and they're going to happen chronologically. It's three different events three different sequences building on each other. So the chart on the left is actually from the Craig Blomberg book, Pentecost to Patmos, and he makes the argument to say, and they sort of take a modified, futurist view, because they try to work in some aspects of the preterist view.
That was not an official book recommendation, by the
well.
way. That does not count.
I'm just citing my sources here. So, they try to work in some aspects of the preterist and the idealist, but they still think things are going to unfold chronologically in the future. And they see the seals, so what you're going to find is that there's going to be 6 seals, and then there's a 7th seal that usually leads into the next sequence. And what Blomberg basically says is that 7th seal was zooming in on the next sequence. So the 7th seal is actually zooming you in to see the trumpets, and then the 7th trumpet is going to zoom you in to see the bowls, but these are sequences that follow each other that are leading up to the end and growing in intensity. So that's the chronological futurist one. That's the things that are take place after this. On the right, this was one I created, and Pastor Dave, I'm looking for a critique here, because when I tried to find a simple chart that explained this idea of a repeat or a recapitulation of the same end judgment. So in this view of interpreting Revelation and the outline, basically people would say that the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, those are all depicting basically the same end times event. Things could grow in intensity, but it's the same event that's being repeated and seen at different angles. And so that's what I was trying to communicate here, that you have the same end judgment, and the seals and the trumpets and the bowls are all talking about the same thing, but you're getting it from different angles. So maybe the bowls are emphasizing a certain thing, the seals are emphasizing a certain thing, and the trumpets are emphasizing a certain thing. So how did I do with my charts here, Pastor Dave? Let's give me a grade here.
The one on the left seems accurate to me. I like the zooming in focused lens thing that Blomberg explained, so I think that's helpful. So my understanding of the other way to read Revelation is that it's progressive parallelism. So you have 7 different cycles in the book, and throughout the book continues to tell the same story 7 different ways, 7 different times. And I have to go back and look at how the seals and bowls and trumpets exactly get told, but there's other things in the book of Revelation that repeat too, and they recapitulate, or they keep being reenacted. For example, the world keeps ending in the book of Revelation. It keeps on getting destroyed.
Basically the way of saying it is you're in a loop. It's kind of a loop of things that are continuing to end.
So it's in chapter 16, it's all over, and then we start it again.
It's all over again.
Yeah. So that's why some people say it's progressive parallelism, and these 7 cycles just continue to tell the same story, which, that's an interesting way to read the book. Some people say, well, what about the thing that John says, and I saw, and I saw, and I saw, and they take that to be more linear rather than repetitive or cyclical. But it could be not so much what happens next, but just what John sees next. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be chronological in that way. So it could be more cyclical, and that's okay. So those are 2 valid ways to read the book.
Okay. Well,
it's like
in regards
NFL
to my chart,
replay.
In regards to my chart, I was trying to make it very simple. So
yeah,
I did the best I could.
I give you a C+. So the
ouch.
The main point is there's different ways to understand the book. So you could see things differently. Not everyone's agreed on how to read the book, so that's okay. We'll talk about it.
Well, maybe if we could just talk for just a moment about your idea of and I saw, and I saw, and I saw. Mm-hmm. So if John is getting caught up into this heavenly realm and he's just seeing flashes of visions, So I don't know if I picture that always being. Well, here's like an engineer always wants to have things like this, followed by this, followed by this.
Right.
But he's really experiencing all these things flooding into his mind at once, and
Right.
somehow he's trying to make sense of it. So
Right.
I could see where, well, maybe it is. He's getting all these flashes of something that's happening parallel to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you use the term engineer. So, are you familiar with Clarence Larkin? He was like a mechanical draftsman who did a bunch of Revelation charts in the like 100 years ago. He
No,
was a
I'm not.
dispensationalist. I bet you've seen his drawings. He's got these charts, and there's like a statue of Daniel with 10 toes, and the toes are really long. They're famous charts on the end times. Anyway, he was like in the field of mechanical drawing, and it makes sense that somebody with that kind of personality is reading the book of Revelation in a certain way, right? Whereas opposed to if you're like an artist or you're a creative type, if you are the type of person that likes to draw portraits or draw pictures, or like, Tim, like produce videos with all of this, color and all of this transition and all of this like creativity and sort of have like an artistic component to it, then you might see the book of Revelation differently, right? So, what was John doing? Was he writing the book more like an engineer, or was he writing the book more like a creative type? People see the book different ways, so that's important.
All right. So that's that. Now, the other chart was in relation to the already but the not yet. So I did find, hopefully this was simple enough for you here, Pastor
A
Dave.
plus, man. This was an excellent chart. I'm so happy with this. Just look how beautiful it is. It's actually only two
Okay. Well, I didn't
lines.
make that one. I found it. There you go.
You think it's more complicated than that, but there's really only a blue line and a brown line.
Real quick, for any of our audio-only listeners, you can go to our YouTube channel, click on this video, and then in the chapters, you can go to there's a chart for that segment, and you can see all these charts that they're
See all
talking
the
about.
wonderful visuals.
Anyway, keep going on.
This is
for
well
our
worth it, man.
subscribers, our YouTube subscribers. So this is meant to communicate what's been popularized as the already not yet or inaugurated eschatology, and basically, if you can see this and you're watching it, the blue line is indicating this age that we're currently in, this present age, and at Christ's first coming, Jesus came and inaugurated the coming of the kingdom of God, the age to come, at his first coming. And so now we're living in what's been called overlapping ages that will be brought to conclusion or consummation at the second coming of Christ and the great judgment, and then there will just be the age to come. So right now there's aspects of both that are present in the world that we live in.
Don't take it away. I love it. So let's just hang out here for just a second, Tim. I know people are just salivating over this. So originally, the prophets kind of thought that these would be two very separate ages. There's this age, and then there's the age to come, right? So if you would like pull the chart apart a little bit and erase the already not yet, this is the way they thought of it. They thought of like this age and the age to come. What was surprising is how it actually unfolded, and now how there's like a little bit of overlap in the middle. And then we have to have...
It's
we
been
have to, like,
2,000 years of overlap.
right. That's what was the curveball. That's what they weren't expecting. Like, yeah, we expected the coming of the Lord. We expected, the great judgment. We expected the resurrection. That was supposed to happen at the end of the age, and then there would be the age to come. But some of those things have happened already, like the resurrection of Christ. The Spirit has come. He was the first fruits of the resurrection. So we had to like squish up the age to come in a way that shows it's already here. Some parts of it,
Right.
but not all of it.
So I think in terms of the
All
first
right,
two
thanks, Tim,
points
man.
of the sermon,
Tim
which
couldn't
we'll
take
get
it any
to, we were
longer.
talking about the recognizing the darkness and radiating the light. So we recognize that we do live in a dark world. This age is still here, and yet the kingdom of God has broken through, specifically in the lives of believers, and we are called to bring the kingdom of light now and push back the darkness until one day our Savior will come and bring the light in all its fullness.
Good stuff. Which leads us into what you were talking about yesterday. You had some dark and light in your sermon outline. So
I tried.
Can you give us like a 60-second, what was Revelation 1, 9 to 20 about? A flyover?
Yeah, well, it followed Revelation 1, 1 to 8, and it preceded Revelation 2, 1 to 5.
Like and subscribe. You're not going to get this kind of content just anywhere, folks. We're going to like give
So-
you the secret
You
to
may have watched the
unlocking.
episode last week, and I guess it was entitled "No Pastors, No Problem," which apparently I guess that's what we're doing now.
Can we have a conversation about that? The title of last week's video, Tim, Noah. There were some creative liberties while we were out.
I was sick.
The
You
cats
were- I don't
are
know what you were
away,
doing, but
and
you
the
weren't
mice
here.
will play. Right, and I'm kind of feeling like a little bit unnecessary around here. No pastors, no problem, huh?
All right.
Tim, what's going on here with that title?
Well,
Is it on
Noah,
the flip side? Is it
You got some explaining to do too.
Mo pastas, Mo problems? If there's more pastors.
Yeah, it probably is true.
so for those of you who saw Noah and I that we were doing the podcast and skipped the episode last week, we invite you to go watch it. We had some fun with it. But yeah, you guys weren't here, and we missed you guys, and we thought it sounded clickable. If you really break it down, Noah, back me up here. You know,
Noah's going to leave you hanging.
we
That was Tim's idea.
we didn't have a problem. We know there was a problem. We solved it. Therefore, there was no problem. But now you guys are back, which is what we want.
You got a problem? Yo, I'll solve it.
I don't know. Noah, what do you got? Anything? Help me out here.
Yeah, we didn't have any problems. I mean, we weren't casting lots to see who would take your place when you were out. So.
No, it was more of a they're gone. We just Behind the Pulpit just came back. We can't just not have an episode.
Look at them struggling to answer this question right now. I just
know.
noticed that.
Yeah. Do you ever feel dispensable?
Yeah.
This
So
is
in all
great.
seriousness,
This is great radio.
In
I
all
love this.
seriousness, guys, thank you. You guys both stepped up in huge ways last weekend. You took care of the Sunday service. Everything went off without a hitch. You took care of not only that, but then the Monday behind the pulpit. And we have a great staff. I mean, you know, Tim and Noah
There you go.
are just killing it. So thank you guys so much. No pastors, no problem. I think I'm going to take more vacation.
That's a good thing, right?
I think we do prefer to be back here. We're better at this. You guys are better at that. So
All right.
make sure you're here.
We'll
you
take
guys
it.
did well.
All right. So anyway, the 60-second flyer. The reason I said that is obviously I was not here last week, so we were going out of order. Last week you were talking about Revelation 2. So we kind of skipped back to the end of Revelation 1, and we were looking at John's commissioning to write the rest of the book. So there's a lot of write, therefore, based on what you have seen. And so the first part we looked at Revelation 1, 9 to 11, where basically John talks about why he's on Patmos, that he's a partner in the tribulation and building the kingdom and needing endurance in the midst of the hard times. The second part was his actual vision of Christ, the Son of Man, and we talked about how that's a call for us to radiate the light of Christ. We saw the images of the lampstands, which are the seven churches in Revelation, and we're gonna talk about that next week. Noah started to get into that with Ephesus, the previous week, and then at the end we talked about how we need to rest in the victory, and that was the whole piece about Jesus having the keys, that he has the keys of death and Hades, and we should fear not, even if the world is dark. Fear not, because he has already won the victory for us, and he holds authority over this entire world. He holds the 7 stars in his hands. So we talked a lot about that, a few nuances that were underneath each of those points, but those were the main ones we looked at in the sermon.
Powerful vision of Christ in chapter 1.
White hair,
Wisdom.
tongue like a double-edged sword, eyes of fire.
Right. That'll
Maybe- you know
make
what?
you fall over like a dead man.
Maybe if Noah edits this, he can turn our eyes on fire. I noticed he likes fire in his recap videos recently.
It's definitely Noah's side of the editing.
See if I can make it happen.
He's got eyes of fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you think Revelation would begin that way? Out of all the ways to begin the book, why start chapter 1 with this image of Christ the way that it's depicted there? What would be the purpose of beginning a book like Revelation with that particular chapter and that description and that depiction? How does that take us where we need to go?
Well, I think in some ways he's setting the stage for what he's going to talk about later on. So as we move through the book, there's going to be other pretty crazy visions that John is going to see and recount to us. And this one starts with Jesus himself, the one who is actually speaking, the one who is bringing the word to him.
Yeah.
So I think this is kind of laying the foundation and setting the stage for what is to come in the rest.
Yeah, it's good. And this world is a scary place, so it's good to know how powerful Christ is in light of everything that we're going to face and the churches face in this particular book. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about something you mentioned with regards to what is the dating of Revelation. So I think there's two
important
options.
question, right?
Remind us again what you were telling us and why does it matter?
So there two main options within, I would say, at least conservative evangelical circles, and there was another slide if you want to put that up here. So some people who opt for the early date say the book was written in this is the one with the emperors, if you pulled that one out. Some people opt for the early date, which was the 60s. There you go on the left if you're watching it. In the 60s.
Nero's nose is something,
dude. I
wonder how accurate that
these guys were
is.
not good-looking guys. I was looking for busts and statues, and these were some of the other ones made them look really bad. But anyway, so the early dating would be the 60s, and Nero would have been the great persecutor of the church, persecutor of Christians, throwing Christians to the lion's den, literally in the arena. And if you're somebody who takes more of a preterist view on Revelation, I think you have to take that early date because you're seeing much of the book as being fulfilled in the first century, leading up to that destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, which we talked about quite a bit with the Olivet Discourse over the summer and Luke 21. The other one...
and sometimes when you read the Bible, like deciding the date of writing doesn't affect the interpretation that much.
Right.
You can kind of go with a couple different options. In this case, this decision actually does have an impact in terms of how you're going to interpret other sections of the book.
Right. So obviously, if you don't opt for the early date, if you opt for the later date, which I would say is probably the majority opinion, this was written late first century, 80s, 90s, under the Emperor Domitian, then you can't really take a preterist view of Revelation. You're looking more at some futuristic aspects of the book, throughout church history and maybe beyond. So the emperor who was emperor in the 80s and 90s was Domitian, and now it's debated about how much he actually persecuted the church. Some people say he did. Others will say, well, the persecution did not come from Domitian. It came from more of the local provinces and this group called the imperial cult that was actually trying to infiltrate the churches of the first century, which may be why John offers that writing to the seven churches. So think about it more. It's like the federal government is not persecuting you; it's the state. So the state of New Jersey is coming after you, and your local municipalities are coming after you, as opposed to the federal government. That was sort of the debate about how much Domitian was bringing the persecution versus others, and he may have been. I'm not sure that he was really a friend to Christians, but was he feeding them to lions like Nero? We don't know. So those are the two options for dating. If you're really liberal, some people will put it later on in the 2nd and 3rd century, but that's not us. These are the two options for conservative scholars. You got some papers over there.
Well,
I got some thoughts on this date, man.
I'll just add to it. Some people may not be interested here. Skip to the next section of the video. But if you are interested in the date and why people would decide what they decide, sort of the earlier date is usually based on internal evidence, and then the later date is usually based on external evidence. And so in favor of the early date, there's a couple things of internal evidence. Number one is chapter 11 of Revelation seems to describe the temple in a way that depicts it as still standing. It says, go measure the temple. So if there's no temple, if it's already been destroyed, then that chapter is hard to interpret, though you can get there, but it's challenging. Another thing with the internal evidence in terms of the early date is this whole number 666. And so right. There's a way to interpret that with gematria. So
that's not going to be a barcode on your head.
Some people think it is. Some people think this is a more natural number that John's readers would have been able to figure out. He says this calls for wisdom, and I think he expects anybody who's like reading the book of Revelation to be able to figure that out. So there's there's people who say if you look at the name Nero Kaiser and then you take the letters and turn them into numbers and then add them all up, the name Nero Kaiser in Greek actually adds up to 666. And so because of that, people say, well, this is referring to Nero. Other copies of Revelation, actually our earliest copies of Revelation, have the number 616. Dan Wallace, who was one of my professors at Dallas Seminary, says 616 was not the name of the beast. It was the neighbor of the beast who lived a few doors down, which is a joke for you Bible nerds out there. But actually what it was depending upon what language you're speaking, if it's Greek, it's 666. If it's Hebrew, it's 616. And so the reader could figure it out depending upon the audience. Sometimes the translator would change the number. Or I should say that it's backwards. I think it's in Hebrew is 666 and then Greek is 616. Anyway, so Bruce Metzger, who's a famous textual critic, says that was an intentional variation of the book of Revelation so that the readers could better figure out, hey, he's talking about Nero, the guy who persecuted the Christians, the guy who I think killed his mom, the guy who castrated that boy and then married him, the guy who set fire to Rome and then blamed it on the Christians. That lunatic is the 666 beast that Revelation 13 is talking about. If so, Nero reigned in the 60s, and I think he died in 68, so they would say probably an early date. The other passage is in Revelation 17, verses 9 through 11, where John says the 7 heads are 7 mountains. And you know how New York is called like the Big Apple? Like we have like nicknames for cities. Like,
right.
What are some other nicknames? Like Chicago is like the Windy City. Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love.
The Big Easy.
The Big Easy.
New Orleans, right?
Yeah. So there was a nickname for Rome, and it was this city on 7 hills because they built the city on 7 hills. And in Revelation 17, it says that these 7 heads are 7 mountains depicting Rome, and then there's 7 kings. Well, if you count the kings, if you start with Julius Caesar, you go Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, Tiberius, that's 3, Gaius is 4, Caligula is 5, Claudius is 6, and then the 7th is Nero. So Nero would be the 7th emperor. So Revelation 17 seems to be saying that what we're talking about is the 7th king, the 7th emperor of Rome. So that's another piece of internal evidence that people say the early date is probably the most accurate date. So some people believe that. And then if that's the case, then they see most of the book talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, the coming judgment upon them, that the harlot is riding the beast. The harlot is the nation of Israel that's apostate, that has rejected Christ. And then you remember how the high priest, used the authority of Rome to kill Christ in some ways. So that's the harlot riding the beast of Rome to conspire together and crucify the Lord of glory.
Okay.
So that's the preterist way of seeing it.
So would they still see Revelation 19, 20, 20? Those are still future.
Yeah, typically those chapters would still be yet to come in the future. The second coming, the millennium, the new heavens and new earth. But then, the parts in the middle there, they say, are talking about AD 70. So that's the internal evidence. There's counter arguments for all of that. So that's what some people say, though. Now, the external evidence for the late date is there's a guy named Irenaeus. Irenaeus was a disciple of Polycarp. Polycarp was a disciple of John. And there's a famous quote by Irenaeus, I'll read it here in his book, Against Heresies, where he says that John received the revelation almost in our time toward the end of the reign of Domitian. So this is Irenaeus, who probably would have known when Revelation was written, who seems to be saying that Revelation was written in the reign of Domitian. Now, he may or may not have been right. We don't know. Or there's another way to interpret this statement that says that not so much the revelation was seen during that time, but that John was seen still alive during the reign of Domitian. So that's one way to say it. I can see I'm really exciting Bob here with this great information.
I'm not on camera, not to mention that.
So the other thing about people, they say the late date is they say those churches, like in Revelation 2 and 3, some of them are in steep decline. Like Ephesus has lost its first love. Noah preached about that. Has there been enough time for Smyrna and for these other churches to decline in their spiritual vitality by the mid-60s? I mean, they were just planted, in the early 50s. So the later date gives those churches more time to decline and be in the state that they're in by the time they're getting sort of rebuked a little bit by John in Revelation 2 and 3. So
if it was an early date, basically those churches would have just just started
like
recently.
church plants.
Yeah, they're still in the infancy stages.
Right. Now, there's answers to that, but those are sort of some of the arguments. And there's good, godly scholars on both sides. I think the early date has some pretty compelling evidence, but I also see the late date as being relevant too. Both dates really apply. Both dates were written during times of persecution. Both dates have incredible relevance to the original readers and to us who are reading it today too. So, yes, it matters for your interpretation, but the book is still very relevant and valid no matter what date you choose. Okay, that's the end of the date segment. Thank you for
welcome back.
enduring.
Those of you that skipped ahead, missed out on the history section.
Wake up! The date section's over. I can get in the weeds,
Pastor
man.
Dave, we don't care about these dates.
We don't care about these dates, man. Why is this guy going on and on? Domitian, Nero.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is your top takeaway from Revelation chapter 1 as you unpack that text for us? What should the readers be thinking about as we grab our car keys and head out into our journeys this week? What should we be taking with us here?
I heard
We've
some
got
shaking.
the keys.
There's shaking it over there. There it is.
What's the top takeaway here?
Question: did you shake your car keys this morning, Tim?
No.
My goodness, it fell flat.
This is
Pastor
what
Dave.
I
happens.
shook him. That's the wrong thing. I shook
Who
him.
has the keys? Who has the keys?
Jesus has the keys.
Jesus has the keys.
Boom. There's your title.
So,
I like it.
yeah, I think my top takeaway is, and I think it's relevant to say at the beginning, this whole idea of tribulation and suffering, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. I think people are feeling elements of that in their life, and one of the things that I see is that people, and I'm guilty of this too. We run around when things get dark and when things get hard, and we just complain. We just complain about this is terrible, and how many times have we heard somebody say, "Jesus, just come and take me home"? And I don't know that that's. I know that that's a natural feeling. I'm not sure that that's the best attitude. The best attitude is God is working on building resilience in our life so that we would recognize our need to trust and have faith in Christ no matter what it is that we're going through. And no matter how hard things are right now, indeed, in the end, He will make all things right. I think that's what's behind this whole idea of I have, fear not, fear not, fear not. I have the keys of death and Hades. I was dead. I'm alive. I'm the first. I'm the last. Which, as I mentioned, that phrase is often used to signify God's sovereignty over all things within history. So to me, that was sort of the biggest thing, that even in the midst of the darkness, we can still rest in His victory and be in maybe a metaphorical eye in the storm, no matter what we're experiencing.
Right.
Yeah. So that was my big takeaway. Oh,
Very good.
somebody just shouting at me right there.
I had a quote about the keys. Do you mind if I read it? So I was doing some study on the keys because they show up later in the book of Revelation.
That's
So
right.
they show up in chapter 3.
Oh, this was a good one.
A lot
Yeah,
of the
but-
images of chapter 1 show up later, and the images inside of the letters passages are from other parts of the book. So the keys is something I was looking into. Vern Poythress, in his commentary on Revelation, says this, quote, "Christ holds the key of David, representing power of opening and shutting. Analogous to the keys of death and Hades in chapter 1, Christ's authority is a surpassing fulfillment of the key of David from Isaiah 22. And then he says, the key that Christ holds represents His authority to set before Philadelphia, this is the letter to the Philadelphian church, an open door. And he says this, the open door symbolizes freedom to approach God Himself. As a result of this fundamental privilege, the church has freedom to grow and develop spiritually in spite of the opposition and the threats of trial and tribulation. So I thought that was a good sort of elaboration of everything you were talking about yesterday with the keys. Christ has the keys, and it's good to know.
Amen. That's very true.
Well, thanks for bringing the word yesterday. And
Hey, did the best I could. You're doing the next 2 weeks.
yes,
Our schedule
we'll
got
move
thrown
on
off a bit.
this weekend to the 7 churches of Asia Minor. Now, we preached on this like 4 or 5 years ago in the fall of 2019. We did a sermon series called 7.
A 7-week series.
So we're not going to go that slowly through this, but we have done that before. So we are going to be making available and reminding people that those expositional messages are available online. as well as there was a workbook that we provided that took people through that journey of those 7 churches. And so you'll be hearing more about that. If you'd like to do some devotional work on your own in those 7 letters, next week would be a good week to do that as we unpack that passage. So that's where we're headed.
That's
and
good.
now we've come to that time, Tim, where you put us all on edge a little bit, because Tim has the keys to the Theology Sprint. And
Well, I
what
got
are you
some-
going to do for us?
I
here,
have
Tim?
some breaking news.
All right.
The keys are being handed off.
Wow.
I have been
Sounded like
asking-
you created a hole in the wall over there.
I've been handling the Theology Sprint for a while,
Either
but
that or your car was summoned and it just went through the wall and we didn't know about it.
as many people know, there are 2 heads to the visual video production stuff here at NBC, also known as the Velt. And Noah is the other head to that dragon. And I thought it would be, I want to give the Theology Sprint to Noah as a gift to a good friend. So Noah, he's been sitting on one for 2 weeks. I don't
think this is fair. Noah has an MDiv. Like, these questions are about to get really hard.
We're always improving here, and that means harder
man.
questions. No more ChatGPT from me. It's
my goodness.
Noah's brain. So Noah, let him have it.
I'm praying for the keys right
So I didn't
now.
know it was
All right. Well, we have been in the end recently in the book of Revelation, so we're going to flip to the other side of the Bible of Genesis in the beginning. So today's Theology Sprint is, why was Satan in the Garden of Eden before the fall of man when Adam and Eve sinned and ate the fruit?
Oh, I think I know this one, but I'm gonna let them answer it.
Tim wants to sprint a little bit.
Why was he just there in the first place? Why did God allow him to be there?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think most people answer that by going the free will route. So God allowed Satan to go in there to offer the temptation to Adam and Eve because God ultimately wanted them to choose to obey God. And because they didn't, sin came into the world. But it was there as an act of free will to test their faith and obedience to the Lord.
Satan was certainly a created being, and the angels were created prior to the creation of humankind. We read, like in the book of Job, that when God created humans, the angels shouted for joy. That's one of the things we learn from the poetic sections at the end of the book of Job. And so Satan, being one of those created angelic beings, most likely a fallen angel, would have been present as a created being at that time. Why was he allowed to be in the garden? Now, that's a great mystery as to why God would allow that source of temptation, that crafty serpent, to be part of this story and part of this world. I think one day we'll get a fuller answer to that, but I kind of like your answer, that there was a test that was allowed, and that the great enemy
Whether
of our
that's
soul...
true or not, you're right, we don't know, but I've heard people answer it that way.
Yeah.
So
In some ways, it was Satan's questioning of God's ability to rule over his creation. Satan, if you read sort of typologically passages like Ezekiel 14 and Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, you see this desire for Satan to elevate himself above the throne of God and sort of take away God's right to rule. And in some ways, the creation of humankind and the story of redemption has been also answering that question of who has the right to rule. And I think once the new creation is ushered in, something that we don't get to experience till the end of the Bible, we will now have the final answer to that question. Only Christ has the right to rule, and that rule will never, ever again be questioned. But until then, the story plays itself out, and the Prince of Darkness remains. And we tremble not for him, though, because Christ has the keys.
I have a follow-up question. First ever.
All right.
Do you feel that...
Do you think that was satisfying to Noah, first of all?
Yeah, no. What do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Dang. All right. Theology Sprint.
Now Tim's about to make it
Part
harder.
B.
Follow
Do you, because I've heard this too, and you almost, I think, touched on it. Do you guys believe that the first sin was Adam and Eve, or do you think it was Satan's pride in heaven that was the first sin?
I think it's clear that once we find the serpent lurking around like the crafty animal in the garden, that he has already fallen. So it appears that his pride in heaven and the fall of the angels preceded the fall of humanity, We have actually a statement in our Articles of Faith. Bob and I like to quibble about this every time we have a membership course, but it refers to Satan as the author of sin. And because of that, I think what the statement is trying to say is that we cannot say God is the author of sin, period, full stop. That's not correct. But it also appears to say that Satan was present and already fallen by the time human beings were created and given their test. So that's my answer. I don't know if you disagree there, Bob, but...
Well, I guess the only thing I would add to it is that angels are different than humans. So I don't know if we would bifurcate that out. I think certainly Adam and Eve sinned, and it had an impact on the entire human race, which would be different than the impact of Satan choosing to sin. Now, by the way, regarding the Articles of Faith, so that the whole idea being the author of sin, the reason we quibble about it is that the Bible doesn't explicitly say that. This is sort of an inference that's put into the Articles, and I think you're right to say that we don't believe God is the author of sin. So who is it?
Right. The fountain of evil himself. Satan.
Father of lies.
Yeah. So I think he was definitely created and fallen prior to humankind. That was the first sin, the sin of pride. And we human beings fell in his steps with his sort of example leading the way. So essentially we committed the same atrocity ourselves and went the way of Satan, which is why sometimes in the Bible, Jesus will say things like, "You're of your father, the devil," right? It's like the serpent had seed and multiplied enemies of God. So
good.
Does that help, Tim?
It does. Thank you.
All right. That was a lot of sprinting, so you guys need to be careful. You asked us to sprint, then we stopped, and then you said sprint again.
Back-to-back sprints.
I'm out of breath. All right.
That was like hurdling, Tim.
In the track and field world, we call that a multi-event day.
That was, yeah. So.
All right. Well, that's for younger folks.
Couple things coming up in the life of our church, though, that we wanted to highlight. The first is pretty quick, man. The first Sunday in October is our Underground Sessions of the Fall. Is This the End? Perspectives on Eschatology, Israel, and the Millennium. October 6th, 5:30 to 7:30. Come early at 5 o'clock. What kind of dinner are we having, Bob?
Yeah, so let me just mention we don't know. Maybe it is the end. Maybe Jesus will come back by the end of the event. We'll see.
That's always a possibility.
Be a welcome thing. So yes, if you have not registered for that event, please go and do so. In particular, if you want to come for dinner, we're gonna be doing dinner at 5 o'clock, and we're going to be having some Turkish food in honor of the 7 churches of Revelation. So some Turkish
modern
food
day
coming
Turkey.
Up. Yeah,
ancient Asia Minor.
Some wonderful meats and breads and spices and all that. So yes,
Turkish delight.
It will be a Turkish delight. But you need to register right now to let us know if you're coming, so we have the appropriate amount of food and you don't go hungry when you come for that event. But it's going to be a great night, great panel. Pastor Dave's going to take a crack at moderating, and we'll see how the night goes. But sign up for that.
Awesome. And then on the heels of that is our biannual Contend conference. Does that mean it happens every other year? Biannual? Is that the correct term for that?
So far, it's been biannual.
Let's just call it prophetically. The biannual Contend Conference, Resisting the Drift.
That's right. We had a wonderful video. Feel free to splice that in if you want, Tim, that highlighted what we're going to be talking about.
Ooh,
but
that would be a good splice.
The big thing right here is that registration is now open, so make sure you go and register right now. Register before December 31st, otherwise the price goes up. So if you want the early bird pricing, please do that right now. Also, if you're able to volunteer, there's 2 buttons on the website. There's one that says I'd like to volunteer, and then you can click on that and you can say, hey, these are the days I want to volunteer because it's a multi-day event. Here's the times, here's the area I'm interested in volunteering in. Let us know. That would help us greatly as we are recruiting volunteers for the weekend. But also, if you're registering to volunteer, you also need to register to attend. So make sure you click on both buttons and fill out both forms. It's going to be a great weekend, Pastor Dave.
January 31st. It's going to be here before we know it.
Make sure you don't get sick this time.
Oh,
okay?
man,
I want you to be
such
here for
a bummer. Lord, please keep me healthy.
And I will be splicing in that video at the conclusion of this podcast, so
Wonderful.
Stay tuned to that
Awesome.
if you are
Boom.
watching.
Check it out. Hey, thank you guys for watching today. Good to be back with you behind the pulpit.
Shake your keys this week.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Something is happening, almost imperceptible. The change is slow. The currents of culture can carry us far from where we stood. We may not notice it until we open our eyes and truly see where we've ended up. We call this drift. This drift has been unfolding for years, and now it's clear. Truths we once held dear are being questioned. The gospel, the essence of faith, is becoming obscured. Leaders we trusted, institutions we relied on, all drifting away. What do we do in the face of this? Join us January 31st to February 2nd at the Second Underground Sessions Contend Conference, a weekend dedicated to resisting the drift, to standing firm amidst a culture of compromise. The weekend will be hosted by Bob Erbig and featuring special guest speakers Elisa Childers, Neil Shenvey, Jason Thacker, and more. Just as Hebrews exhorts us to pay closer attention to what we have heard, so too will we learn to resist the drift with boldness, clarity, and charity. Are you ready to resist the drift? Stand firm in your faith and sign up now.